You're watching the Slice Tower Hamlets election coverage ahead of the general election on the 4th of July. Peter Skeets is the Reform UK candidate for Bethnal Green and Stepney, and he joins us now. Peter Skeets, thanks for joining us today. I'm going to ask you firstly, why are you running for office in Bethnal Green and Stepney?
Well, first of all, good morning to you and thank you for having me. The reason that I'm running for MP in Bethnal Green and Stepney is because I believe professional politicians, such as the one that's been in post in Bethnal Green and Stepney for the last period, um, have conspired across the House of Commons to do nothing but manage the decline of the area and our country. And I think something needs to be done about that.
Okay, and what would you say are some concerns or issues that are unique to the constituency of Bethnal Green and Stepney that you will change if elected as MP?
Um, that's actually the easiest question that you could have possibly asked me, um, because I'm going to compare what I'm going to do if elected to what the previous incumbent has done. One is I will be visible as opposed to invisible, and I will be vocal on the issues that the constituents need me to be vocal instead of silent for internal party reasons.
Okay. Now over the weekend it was revealed that three Reform UK candidates have been dropped over racist remarks they've made. Um, and the extent of racism in the party has also led to two Reform candidates defecting to the Tories, with one announcing that this morning. Does your party, Reform, have a culture of racism among its candidates and volunteers?
Well, obviously, I'm going to say no. I can only speak for myself, and I can only speak to uh, my actions. But I wondered if you might be asking me that question, particularly because of the campaign poster that I put out um, on Saturday, which was a large picture of Dick Van Dyke playing Bert in the 1964 movie Mary Poppins. Do you remember that his cod Cockney accent? Well, that's what happened to Nigel in the previous week. An actor linked to Channel 4 turned up at the campaign office and with a all god blimey accent, governor, and Nigel was basically stitched up. I know that the party has complained, and I'm sure that will play out. It helps the centre left media that we've got in this country to cast my party and members of it as racist. It's an easy catch-all, and it is mostly nonsense. It's cute. I don't doubt that Reform has a few people that could use fruity language at the wrong time, but it's curious how there's so much focus on that and us, but there's no focus on the fruity language that comes opposite and against Jewish people that exists in the Labour Party. There's no such focus on the Conservatives, who have got a anti-Islamicist wing. All of these things that are happening that the media likes to jump on are happening because our success. We are now, by numbers, the second biggest party in the country. That's very, very scary for some people.
It might be due to your success in the polls, but also could it not be because of the ubiquity of these cases where it's coming out that several candidates have been saying these things on social media? And obviously you referenced the Channel 4 investigation, but also one of the three candidates who was recently dropped was Edward Oakenfold, candidate for Derbyshire Dales, who reportedly said that on social media that sub-Saharan Africans were diluting the UK's IQ. He said this in July last year, but he's only just been dropped. Another person recently dropped was Raymond Saint, who was standing in Basingstoke, and he was recorded as being a BNP member on a list published in 2009. I just want to know if you are at all disappointed in your party's leadership for not properly vetting candidates before allowing them to run.
Well, Nigel and Richard did appoint a professional vetting company to weed out all of these things. And I think if the pace of the growth of the party would have gone to what we thought that was the script, frankly, we were all expecting an election in Q4 of this year. I think the vetting would have been complete. However, Mr. Sunak called this election early. Why did he do that? Well, he did that with 6 weeks' notice, which in electoral terms means we had 2 weeks to get 630 people over the line with regards election nominations. And it caught us off guard for a moment, as it did everyone. The reason that he called the election early is to specifically to try and catch us off guard on that front, and also I think to catch off guard the Good Law Project, which you might have seen is headed or at least faced up by Carol Vorderman, who has done some fantastic stuff digging into the Tory corruption around the VIP lane. So, yeah, I mean, you know, as political parties go, do we have some idiots knocking about? Yep. Does Labour? Yes. Lots more than us. Do the Conservatives? Well, yes, they do, but we know something else about them. They're incompetent and corrupt. I think there are things that the people of Bethnal Green and Stepney need to know more, or are more concerned about, than what a Channel 4 equity card holding actor did in Clacton or some idiot did in Derbyshire. And I'd love to speak about that as well.
Well, I suppose that leads me on to my next question. Reform is offering an alternative to people who are disappointed and disillusioned with 14 years of Conservative government. But in the press, it is hard to associate reform with anything apart from negativity and divisiveness. Can you tell me what hope reform has to offer to normal working people?
Yes. With regards to your comment about the newspapers painting a kind of bad picture of us, well, of course they are. They're part of the status quo. They're part of the same bubble that includes Channel 4 and Sky News and the UK hating BBC. They're all part of that. So of course you're going to hear bad things, because a political earthquake's happening such that we're on like 24%. We're on a quarter of the electorate, and the party of government in our country for the last really 100 years is only just scraping past the Lib Dems, who stand for next to nothing. Something's happening, and I would say that and I'll answer your question about hope in a second. I would say that the people, the population, are a great deal smarter than the media gives them credit for. With regards to hope, one of my campaign posters, and I wish I had it now. I could read it for you word for word, but I'm full of hope. I was using a photo done of me for one of my posters, and all my friends said, "Don't use it. You look too happy." And I was like, "Well, I am a happy person. Why am I a happy person? Well, personally, I'm happy, but generally, regardless of what the Conservatives have done to our country, regardless of how Labour are going to screw it up for the next 5 years, because they do that every single time they get in, I'm still full of hope. Why? Our country is Shakespeare, the Beatles, the defeat of Nazism, Harry Potter, James Bond. We punch way higher than our weight, and the fact, I think one of the underrated treasures of our country is the fact that we were able to exit empire into, and that imperialistic period that not only we went through, by the way, we were able to exit that into a Commonwealth, a colourblind Commonwealth of equals, before diversity was even trendy. And I think that's an absolutely magnificent thing. That's why I'm full of hope.
Okay. Well, it's interesting that you use the word colourblind, and you bring up the topic of diversity, because obviously you're running in Bethnal Green and Stepney, in Tower Hamlets, where 4 in 10 residents are born outside of the UK. In the Reform Manifesto, there's a lot of emphasis upon cutting immigration. It says record mass migration has damaged our country, and multiculturalism has imported separate communities that reject our way of life. What do you say to voters who feel Reform UK's views aren't in line with the spirit of diversity and multiculturalism in Tower Hamlets that many people are very proud of?
Well, here's the thing. Immigration has caused our country problems, and that's nothing to do with whether you've got a brown face or a white face, or whether you're a Catholic or a Muslim. Nothing to do with it. If you've got, as we have, a social infrastructure, when I say social infrastructure, I mean hospitals, doctors, roads, access to water, electricity, etc. If you've got social infrastructure to support 60 million people, and you've got spending that covers that infrastructure, but the population goes up to 68 and the spending and the wealth doesn't, well, what does that mean to the people to the 6 out of 10 in Bethnal Green and the 4 out of 10? What does it mean? Well, it means that everyone's class sizes are bigger. It means everybody waits longer for to see the doctor. So it's the immigration issue that we are focusing on is nothing to do with race. It's very well conflated into a race argument by the likes of the UK hating BBC, Channel 4 and others, because it's convenient and it's quick and it's clickbait and all those other things. But it's just 60 million people, a country that can service 60 million people with 68, and that population is probably going to 80. So my party had the idea, why don't we just cap things apart from essential immigration while we sort things out and catch up. That's not racist. It's sensible.
Wouldn't you say that reform has played quite a major role in indeed racializing this conversation? I mean, another of the candidates who was recently forced to drop out was Leslie Lilly, who said that people arriving to the UK in small boats were scum, and then he actually said that he hopes their families get robbed, beaten, or attacked. So I feel that reform do have a responsibility in the demonization of ethnic minorities when it comes to talks about immigration.
Well, once again, you've picked out one lunatic from our party that's come out with reprehensible language, right? That's nothing to do with the issue of 60 million being able to afford 60 million people and service them safely, and the population going up to 68. You can very, very easily, from those facts, as I'm saying, say, yeah, but what about Charlie Smith? He said that we should send all the blacks home. Of course you can trot out those things. It's as easy as pie. But the fundamental infrastructure problem that we've got with the country is that we earn enough and we pay enough tax to service a population of 60 million, but we've got a population of 68. So something has to be done. And pausing non-essential immigration while we catch up, it's nothing whatsoever to do with whether you've got a brown face or who you call God. It's nothing to do with it.
Well, what about industries like manufacturing, like hospitality, like construction, which are already still struggling to plug staffing gaps after Brexit? What do you say to people who work in those industries who feel that reducing migration would be detrimental to the economy because they rely so much upon migrant labour?
Okay. The reason that major, sometimes mega corporations spoke out for the kind of open door immigration that we had when we were part of the Soviet that is the European Union, is because they wanted to suppress the working man's wages, right? They want cheap labour. And what does that do to people? Well, it means that they can't pay the rent. It means that they can't pay the bill to cover their car, which is all of a sudden more expensive because of you Les, a tax on working people by a Labour-run administration. So the mega corporations here have to get used to the fact that paying someone £11.30 an hour is reprehensible in itself when the CEO can earn billions. So really what we should be doing is trying to balance our workplace such that normal working people can get paid a fair wage for a fair day's work, and that there's not cheating and greed at the top. So just consistently putting forward the argument that we must have cheap labour. No, we need companies to pay a proper wage so that people can afford to live and bring up their families.
Well, you mentioned ULEZ just then and said it was an attack on working people, and I would like to ask you about the environment. Tower Hamlets, where the borough where you're running, has the fifth worst air quality of any London borough. And the environment is a cause for concern for a lot of local residents here. All the other major political parties have targets to achieve net zero, but Reform wants to scrap the goal of reaching net zero altogether. Does your party not believe in the threats of climate change?
So, with regards net zero, I do believe it is a strategy that will ultimately drive our country into poverty and put working people in a worse place. Yes, I absolutely do. I think it's insane. Do you know the CO2 content of air?
You tell me.
That would be no then. That's all right.
No, I said this is an interview for you to tell constituents what you care about.
Okay. Well, I care about people more than abstract globalist concepts. Okay, so that's the first thing. CO2 content of air that is actually 0.04%. Right? So the world's turning itself upside down at the moment and running for net zero, and the gas that we've got to bring down is apparently CO2, which is 0.04%. Do you know how much human produced CO2 is versus nature? Well, I won't ask you, I'll say, right, 4%. So
are you suggesting that people are overplaying the amount of CO2 humans are producing, and this shouldn't be a priority of our next government?
Quite right. What should be a priority of our next government is principally taking care of the workforce that generate the wealth for our country. That should be the priority. Net zero, when the coal, you might not know, but my background is in the coal market. The coal market today is bigger than it's ever been in human history, right? And that's despite Kyoto 97 and all the other things, right? Why is it? Well, China and India are going through their industrial revolutions right now, right? At different phases, as is Indonesia. So the coal market largely these days is Indonesia digging as much as it can, China burning as much as it can, India burning as much as it can. Those countries are outside of this race to net zero. And do you think it's just a little bit rich of middle class white people in England, like to say to India, you mustn't use coal. Coal's bad, right? When we've been using it for like 200 years. So, and when you follow the math through 0.04%, and only 4% of that is generated by humans, what we've done is export all of our manufacturing jobs, which used to be handled by working class people, earning a decent we've exported all that to China, and now we buy solar panels, electric vehicles from China, and think that we are somehow holier than thou with regards to the environment. Products coming out of China are made.
So just to be clear, you are in disagreement with the thousands of climate scientists who have produced a lot of evidence to suggest that global warming is increasing because of our use of fossil fuels, and that this will be detrimental indeed to our planet as well as our economy. You disagree with those scientists?
Do you know, by the way, there's hundreds of scientists that say the opposite, but those scientists somehow don't make it into the press. Their papers get unread, or they get depositioned, debunked, and all those other Ds, right? Do you know this?
So if you were elected as MP, and if Reform was elected as our next government, you would have no policies aiming to reduce climate change and our carbon footprints. That would not be a priority of Reform.
It should not be a priority. Our priority should be the working people that make our country work.
But most economists would say that the costs of the UK failing to pursue net zero will ultimately be greater than the costs of achieving it. According to the Office of Budget Responsibility, if global warming continues unmitigated, the UK public sector net debt would rise to 300% of GDP by the end of the century due to the economic shocks of a hotter climate. So, and you know, all of the other major parties have, such as Labour, their plan to tackle climate change is also baked into their plans for long-term economic prosperity. The concerns of working people don't contradict the concerns for our climate. These things can work together, and we can tackle both simultaneously.
We can. Okay. All right. Let's just unpack what you said. Our spending on climate, even though you understand that right now the country's basically bankrupt, right? We borrowed ahead one generation, possibly two, but somehow climate fanatics think that that's okay. We can just borrow more whilst doing all the other things. I'm not entirely sure that we can, but do you know the UK's contribution to global CO2 emissions? Well, you don't, but I will tell you, 1%. So,
okay.
Just a second. 0.04% is CO2 in the air. Only 4% of 0.04% is human driven, right? And our country is only 1% of that 0.04, right? If climate fanatics really did the math and truly believed in it, they would be doing one thing and one thing only, and that is demonstrating outside the Chinese and Indian embassies, and never ever buying products.
Are the Conservatives climate fanatics? They have a net zero target. Are Labour climate fanatics? It's just interesting that Reform is isolated in its lack of commitment to addressing the issues of the climate at all. But anyway, I'm afraid we have gone over time. So I have one last question for you, Peter, and it's more of a light-hearted one, just so that our readers and watchers can get to know you a little bit better. So obviously you're running for MP in the East End. Can you tell me your favourite classically East End place to grab a bite to eat or to have a drink?
Favourite places to have a drink? The Marquis of Cornwallis on Bethnal Green Road, which is where we held our hustings last week. 3 candidates turned up. 3, right? All the others. That would be my favourite place to have a drink. And with regards eats in the East End, let me think. I'm a big fan of that curry house on St Catherine's Dock, but I mean I haven't been there for ages. There you go. Usually I eat in the West End, but anyway.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Peter Skeets, Reform candidate for Bethnal Green and Stepney.
Thanks for your time and thanks for asking me.